Hey, 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 you know what day it is. It's Gaslighting Tuesdays with our swipes. Today's podcast was extra lit with race baiting added in to give it that special something. This week, racist Meghan Markle sees the opportunity to fuel further divisiveness of racism in America by exploiting Black women. This week's underwhelming Markle wisdom tackles the stereotype of the angry Black woman. Today's guests were two comedians, one by the name of Ziwi, who is some comedian that is not really funny or interesting. And the other was Issa Rae, who is actually really funny and talented, but she's extremely woke. Both these ladies are from Los Angeles, and both of them are in the Hollywood entertainment circle. Once again, Meghan Markle chooses people that are familiar to her surroundings and her environment and what she grew up with. Where this podcast misses the mark, believe it or not, is the lack of diversity. We are now 7 episodes into it, and if you haven't noticed by now, the only diversity or inclusion that we're seeing is based off of the color of people's skin or their ethnic background, which I think is very racist. And Spotify, I hope you're listening. You sure didn't get what you paid for. Initially, this podcast was to be about looking at the labels that held women back, not looking at labels that held women back in Hollywood and revise Meghan Markle's childhood history with a bunch of lies. It's typical Meghan Markle to make it all about herself, and what she's using this podcast for is to really reset the brand Meghan while covertly attempting damage control from the bad press that Meghan has received this year of being exposed for being a liar, a manipulator, and a bully. Today's Arswipes does address being difficult or angry as a result of being Black, as well as making up more lies. So let me rip into this. So, this next level lunatic begins her podcast with another story that I'm willing to bet is completely fabricated. She opens up by saying, "About 2 years ago, my husband and I went to have a socially distanced dinner with another couple. Actually, it was just drinks because this was when there was still so much uncertainty with COVID. We followed all the rules and we met friends at a distance. And while it was great to just have human interaction again, an even greater moment happened as we were leaving. The wife handed me a book that she said she thought I might find interesting. I thanked her. I put it in my purse, only really having a chance to skim through it once I arrived back home." Already, this story sounds made up. Who calls their friend the wife? And notice that Megan never ever says Harry's name. It's almost like she's embarrassed to say his name, or Harry is some sort of possession of hers. And when I did, I was actually shocked. "Did you know this?" I kept nudging my husband as we were sitting there in bed. And what I was referring to was what I was learning in this incredible book, the title of which, by the way, is Algorithms of Oppression by Internet Studies scholar Safiya Noble. And in the book, Noble pointed out what she found in this research study to better understand how the digital age shaped our perception of each other, especially of women, and specifically of women of color. Her findings in this book had my jaw on the floor. She established that when you type in a question on the Google search engine, it would, as we've all seen before with autofill, try to guess what your question will be. I'm going to pause right here because I know many of you are saying, that woman's face looks very familiar, as it should. This race baiter is part of the Harkle's propaganda. Safiya Noble is an associate professor of gender studies and African American studies and the director of the UCLA Center for Critical Internet Inquiry, or known as C2I2. They are a partner of the Archwell Foundation on Internet Policy Reform, aka censorship. So it's highly doubtful that this so-called wife gave this book of Safiya Noble to Meghan and she didn't know anything about it. Just so you guys know, the Archwell relationship with this woman started in 2020. And from what I gather from my research is that this UCLA Center for Critical Internet Thinking, aka censorship, is not a nonprofit organization. It's actually for profit. What's very clear to me with Meghan and Safiya's relationship is I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Last year in 2021, Meghan and Harry paid for that President Award for the NAACP only to turn around and create this Archwell digital justice bullshit and giving the award to none other than Safiya Noble. If my memory serves correctly, it was $100,000 that was awarded from the NAACP. So you tell me what's up. Safiya Noble is also guilty for pushing misinformation and writing articles designed to gaslight and cause divisiveness and fueling racism. In this article, Safiya promotes Bot Sentinel and that Fugazi skewed and biased report setting up Meghan Markle's false narrative of being in danger and in jeopardy of these single purpose hate accounts, when really this was a coordinated PR exercise that hurt many people. This professor of UCLA, Safiya Noble, was part of this coordinated attack as an attempt to silence many women for speaking up and telling the truth about the lies that Meghan Markle had been spewing. What is concerning to me is you have a professor at UCLA who is part of pushing this divisiveness that we have in our country today, and it's being masked and called digital justice. So on this podcast, Meghan briefly explains what this book is about, and she sounds like a total idiot. In the book, it says that when you type in a question on the Google search engine, it would, as we've all seen before with autofill, try to guess what your question will be. And she brings up the example that, like, when you type in, why are Black women so ... it would come up with suggestions so loud, so mean, so angry. So Meghan does a shit job at explaining what this book is really about. And she goes into talking about the trope of the angry Black woman as it persists. And she said, as we saw in this book, it was being reinforced constantly in ways we hadn't even realized. And from that, I started to dig deeper. Where does this idea even come from? Why has it been attributed to Black women? And how do some Black women cower from it? So this little tangent that Meghan goes on doesn't really explain anything about the book. So this dummy fails to mention that it's not just when you type in, why are Black women so, and it doesn't even come up now. Google had fixed this and they fixed it across all races. What she's failing to say is that there's also tropes for white women as well. It's worse for white women, by the way, but nobody's talking about it because, God forbid, we support white people now in this world because the social justice warriors will come after you should you show that you don't discriminate and also see white people as equal as well. And these social justice warriors are in this mindset and business of keeping people oppressed and holding people down. If you haven't noticed, Meghan is doing a really great job at continuing her victimhood and sort of crapping on all these wonderful women who have risen above the so-called archetypes and succeeded and thrived. What is concerning to me is that you have a whole generation that is being infected with this ideology and thought process. Again, Meghan is one voice, but she is a loud voice because Spotify has given her a platform to preach this garbage. It's these people that are contributing to deteriorating society and keeping people stupid. What's so cringe about Meghan is that she desperately tries to be something that she's not. So after this stupid made-up story, allegedly, that Meghan tells about the algorithms of oppression, she introduces Ziwi, and Ziwi proceeds to introduce herself by explaining that she's a Nigerian American comedian, actress, and writer. You would think Megan would say welcome or thanks for coming, nice to have you here, but no. Megan chimes in and says, I just had my genealogy done a couple years ago. And Ziwi asks, what are you? And she goes, 43% Nigerian. And Ziwi actually buys this nonsense that she's spewing to her. And in a really annoying Valley Girl accent, she's like, no way. Oh my God, I can't even do it. It's so horrible. Like, it just sounds so like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Yeah, it's so cringe and it's so pretentious, but also so fake. So Megan bullshits again and says, so, I mean, I'm going to start to dig deeper into all of this because anyone that I've told, especially Nigerian women, are just like, what? And Ziwi goes, this is huge for our community. No, honestly, you look like a Nigerian. You look like my Aunt Uzo. So this is great. So here's the thing Megan is feeling herself because now she's got this acceptance with a group of people that she never associated with before. And what you see here and why the sugars are so animated is because they live vicariously through Megan. She married into a family that had once been known to oppress other people. There is this level of envy, admiration, and support. Doesn't matter if she's lying to their face. Just because she's got black blood in her, they see her as one of their own and that had made it. And what they don't understand is that Megan understands this, and this is a game to her. She is going to manipulate these people to use them when she's in need of people to go after others and be a part of this gaslighting frenzy that she goes on when she doesn't get her way. All she has to do is throw out, they're racist. And that's it. They come out in full force attacking others. The sad part about it was that Megan was lying through her teeth with Ziwi. So how do I know that she's not being completely truthful? Well, she just said it that she had genealogy done recently, a couple years ago, and you would think 2 or 3 years ago. But what Megan is forgetting is that in 2015, she said the same thing on the Rachel Ray show. And we all know that going to Malta was all a big scam to get a free trip. Tom Bauer said it in his book.
So I leave straight for the airport from here, and I go to London, then I'm going to Malta, which I'm so excited about. My great-great-grandmother's from Malta. I've never been, so I'm going with a genealogist.
That's
sort
so
of like
cool, and track it down.
Shut up, Megan. Just shut up. So Ziwi had a short and uninspirational segment with Megan, and what you see at the very end of the segment was really Megan dying to say this because it's not about Ziwi. It's about her, and it's about defending the critics. And she says, and I think we could use a little more inspiration and an opportunity to try on what it feels like when we are allowed to just live our truths. To be direct without being called angry, to exist on our own terms, to just be human. And I know just the person to help with that. So, in other words, she is addressing the folks that are calling her a bully. Maybe in her mind, she's thinking, I need to backpedal and create some excuse for why I'm such a nasty asshole. So next up, she brings in Issa Rae, and right off the bat, Megan begins lying.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
This is like a long time in the works, so I'm really happy to be sitting on this couch.
But also View Park.
Don't tell me you're from View Park.
My family goes way back in View Park.
Are you kidding? That's like where I shot my first web series.
So Megan is desperate to try and find a connection with Issa Rae because there's nothing else that Megan can talk to Issa about or relate to. However, she brings up the fact that her family is from Black Beverly Hills. Now, that is not entirely false, but it's also not entirely true. She gives off this impression that she has been around in that area, and that's where her old stomping grounds are, giving off the impression that she was surrounded by Black people while growing up, failing to mention that she went to an expensive private school that was predominantly white and lived with her father for the majority of her formative years in a very white neighborhood. But because she's talking with Black folk, she's got to make sure that they believe that she is also Black just like them. So let's remember what Tom Bauer wrote in his book Revenge. Right after Thomas Markle and Doria got divorced, it says, moving between her parents and their different ways of life, Megan radiated happiness with light olive freckled skin and curly hair. She was not identified by anyone as belonging to any particular race or culture. Racism did not appear to be a problem, especially at school. Although there were few Black people in the Hollywood Hills, Thomas Markles insists that race was never mentioned in his conversations with Megan. Doria mentioned one incident when someone in Woodward Hills had mistakenly assumed she was Megan's nanny. I didn't see any racism in the area, insisted Thomas Markle. Doria never complained that it was difficult as a Black person to live there. Writing for the first time about her background in 2015, Megan did not suggest that her mixed race parentage or biracial, as she would write, complicated her life. She praised her father for making her feel accepted. So there you go. Nowhere does it say View Park, anywhere that she was raised in Black Beverly Hills. And I think the little ounce of truth that Megan was trying to play up was when Doria's father passed away, she inherited the house, which was at View Park. But growing up, Doria never saw her father because he ended up cheating on her mother and the two had separated. So Doria went and lived with her mother, Jeanette. This totally blows up Megan's story about View Park. And when Doria did go to View Park, it was not until 2011. Okay? Megan was a grown ass adult by that point. So after Megan goes ahead and lies about that, I start tuning out because there's nothing that Megan could say now that would ever have me interested because you know that it's not coming from a genuine place, nor is she telling the truth. So for her to go ahead and virtue signal and talk about being an angry Black woman and the origin of where it comes from, well, the only thing that I could say is first take a look at your fan base because they are the ones that are extremely angry and they are giving Black women a bad rep. So if you want to understand where this stereotype is coming from, start with your own house, Megan, but begin at home first and clean that shit up. Otherwise, just shut up, Megan. Just shut up. Now, I'm not going to talk anymore about this podcast because, quite frankly, it was a complete waste of time. I got no value out of it. And again, the whole focus on the color of people's skin and being Black really just makes Megan look more and more like the real racist. And I think it's shameful that she refuses to acknowledge and talk about her other ethnicity, which is Caucasian. I'm not going to put my viewers and subject you guys to more torture in some of this drivel that she has been spewing. But if you are interested in reading the full transcript, I have linked it below. And I'm going to leave everyone this comment that I found on Reddit, which I thought was very appropriate and summarizes how I feel about Megan representing the Black race and exploiting it. Jen Marie says, as a Black woman myself, don't even go there, Rachel. I was born Black. It was not a choice for me. It was not a label that I could conveniently adopt when the racism narrative suited. There wasn't a point in my life when I could identify as anything other than being a person of color. So please, Rachel, do not attempt to be the voice for colored people because you are privileged, and I doubt that the color of your skin has ever actually held you back. And then a side note, this podcast highlights was clearly meant to be called stereotypes, because this is what she is dispelling each week, not archetypes. She should do herself a favor by simply not talking. Well said, Jen Marie, well said, thank you. Okay, on this note, we're going to put this podcast to bed. My overall feedback on it sucked balls. That's all I can really say about it. And the last topic that I want to briefly touch upon is this little shindig that's going down on November 29th in Indianapolis. The only thing that I can say, and it's one word, thirsty. I have a suspicion that this event in Indianapolis was a reaction to the Princess of Wales being voted the top female role model of 2022. Being seen as an inspirational woman and not having to pay people to write that about you must be eating Meghan up. Congratulations to the Princess of Wales. You truly deserve it. And on that note, be well, be safe, and I will be back soon. Bye.
I was such a fraud.